I found two essays on the internet, depending on how many questions you ask. One is kind of an outline from that documentary on Netflix called The Benefits of Minimalism. So these two young men wrote a book on minimalism, and this is kind of how we have to promote the podcast and the online school and the YouTube channel. I kind of want this huge day when everybody signs up for our online school. That's I'm thinking that non-minimalist way. Like one day we're going to get 1,000 new students, but what you really do is you just keep promoting and keep promoting. So they got in their car, this old minimalist Toyota Celica, and they drove to Denver for a book signing, and then they would drive to Reno and then Las Vegas, and they're just crisscrossing the country driving. And sometimes they'd show up and there'd only be 10 people. Another time they got interviewed at a news channel in Reno, and the guy was just it was like one of those local channels where they're not listening to what the answers to his question. So they just asked him some inane questions. He didn't listen to his answer, and in 5 minutes he said, "Okay, well, thanks for coming." And the lights go out, and the guy walks away, and they're just standing there. So, but they kept doing this and doing this. They don't care about how many people are there, or they just kept doing the process. And then one day the Today Show called and said, "We'd like to have you on the Today Show." And they were just like the Today Show. So they went on with I don't remember which version of hosts they had, but they went on and they promoted their book, and it took off from there, and then they made the documentary on Netflix. So that's what this side is. And then the other side is kind of a testimonial for somebody who's actually practiced minimalism and how living with less can make you more happy. And the other thing I wanted to mention, I poked these holes in here for you. I am adding value. I'm constantly adding value. I punched these holes so this can go in your Buddhism notebook that you're all maintaining. So you could add this to your Buddhism notebook. Okay. The other thing I wanted to mention too that I didn't mention in my Dharma talk is the tiny house movement as part of this. It looked pretty cool. I mean, I thought it was crazy, but it's 850 square feet, and you have this wonderful house, but the bedroom converts into the dining room, and there's no mortgage, it's on wheels. A lot of millennials, because of student debt, the student debt is forcing them into this way of life. They can't take on a mortgage. So some of this there's a lot of different factors going on, but I don't know. Teague was telling me that he was going to go off the grid. He watches these shows, and he goes, "I'm going to go off the grid." And I go, "What does that mean?" He goes, "I get a Hummer, and I just drive the countryside, and I would be a traveling PA, and I just go from rural town to rural town, and I have no possessions." I'm like, "Oh, Teague, you're not going to do that." That is very exciting. He might do it. So I'd like to read the first essay. So the benefits of minimalism. Joshua Fields Milburn and Ryan Nicodemus help over 20 million people live meaningful lives with less through their website. Meaningful lives with less through their websites, books, podcasts, and documentary. The minimalists have been featured in the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, Boston Globe, Forbes, Time, ABC, CBS, NBC, Fox, BBC, and NPR, and Netflix. They don't have Netflix on here. When people look toward minimalism as a lifestyle, they often see only the act of decluttering. But ultimately, minimalism involves the benefits we experience once we're on the other side of decluttering. By letting go of everything in the way, I've been able to immerse myself in what's important to me, and the benefits are remarkable. Health. I used to weigh 80 pounds more than I weigh today. Not only was I fat, but I felt tired, stressed, gross. Minimalism helped me untether from that life, a life focused on material success. Once I regained control, I made time to concentrate on my health. This increased focus allowed me to improve my diet, exercise, and sleep, which minimized my stress and increased my happiness. By spending more time on my health, I created more time for everything else. What a beautiful paradox. Relationships. Once I stopped trying to impress others with my consumerist trophies, I was able to reprioritize my relationships by putting primary relationships first, secondary relationships second, and peripheral relationships last. This sounds tautological, but for more than a decade, I apportioned too much time to coworkers and networking buddies, and I forsake, is that the past of forsake? That's past tense of forsake. I forsook the people I cared about most. Finances. This was the initial benefit that led me to minimalism, financial freedom. Sure, I made great money in the corporate world, but I spent even better money. By age 28, I was earning six figures, but I had more than six figures in debt because our culture places an extraordinary emphasis on material wealth as a sign of true wealth. Minimalism taught me that one's true worth is not determined by his or her net worth. Creativity. For years, I put off my passion, writing. I aspired to be a writer someday, but I didn't actually put in the work. Purging the ephemera consuming my time helped me realize aspire is a mere helped me realize aspire is merely a synonym for procrastinate. With the stuff out of my way, I was able to start crafting my personal masterpiece. Contribution. No longer am I obsessed with only myself. By jettisoning my old identity, I formed a new identity, a large part of which revolves around contribution to others. Contributing beyond ourselves brings with it a sense of fulfillment that we can't get from buying things. Giving is living. If we want to feel truly alive, we must give. You see, removing the clutter is not the end result of minimalism. It is merely the first step. Understanding why you're taking that first step gives you the leverage you need to keep going. When in doubt, ask yourself, how might my life be better with less? Those answers are far more powerful than decluttering alone. So I wanted to mention a couple things. They said, I mentioned the American dream. They mentioned in the documentary, one of the things in the American dream is a six-figure salary, is getting six figures. And there used to be an insert in the LA Times called Parade Magazine. And it was I found it very depressing. They'd have a picture of people. And then, so if you're young and you're six figures, that is like the American dream. So it was kind of sad. They'd have a nurse or a teacher or a counselor, and they'd be 50 years old, and they're making $62,000 or $43,000 a year. And I immediately thought of myself, well, I'm 40, and I'm a programmer, and I make more than that. So, but then you'd come across Britney Spears, and it was Britney Spears, pop star, $16 million a year, and she's only 21. So we rank ourselves in that way. And then the other thing that happened, I don't think Linda's here. She doesn't, I will cut this out of the video, but my 2-year anniversary of being a full-time minister was September 1st. Yeah. So, and I actually feel a lot better the third year. I feel much calmer the third year. The first year, they don't have you do that much because you're green. And then the second year, they start giving you more stuff, and then you start to freak out. And then the third year, you're kind of in a rhythm. But we went to get my taxes done after the first year of being a minister. And I love being a minister. It's the best thing I've ever done. I'm so happy. But I make way less money than I used to make. So we went to my tax guy. I have a tax guy. And he turned the monitor around, and he said, this is how much you made your last year of programming, and this is how much you made your first year of being a minister. And it was 2/3 less. And without taking a breath or a beat, Linda, I wasn't sure how to react. I heard Linda say out loud, she goes, it was worth every penny. And that was, I know, isn't that great? And I don't think she thought about it. She didn't think about it, but she said it was worth every penny. And that kind of ended the conversation. And the accountant went, wow. So it really was worth every penny. It was money well spent. I couldn't be more happier. So this is why it's important, not to chase just a salary. You want to do something that gives you meaning beyond just the salary, if possible. So does anybody have any thoughts or comments on this first reading? I think he does a good job of explaining by getting rid of the things that don't bring you joy, you have more time and space for the things that do bring you joy. Oh, where's your...
I thought it was interesting, John, that you brought this up because my son Trent and I, there's a lot of content on YouTube on this minimalism and people forsaking their high-paid tech jobs to do sustainable farming, trying to have a more visceral, simple experience, and they seem to find a lot of joy in that. My question is, and you had mentioned it in your Dharma talk, they never mentioned Buddhism.
Right.
And I was wondering, what is the danger? Because if it looks like and it sounds like and it smells like Buddhism, and they're practicing and they're going through the process of what looks like Buddhism, what is the danger of not exactly calling it Buddhism, but starting at least practice on a path that looks like it could possibly lead them to Buddhism?
Right. So there's two things I've noticed. Some people write books and they're just taking Buddhism and selling it as their own new ideas, and that bothers me. That part bothers me. They're kind of hijacking a tradition and presenting it as this new thing they're promoting. But in this documentary, I almost feel like they don't want to get anywhere near religion. It just seems like they just don't want to talk about spiritual. None of it is spiritual, and they don't want to talk about religion or something. Or maybe they think they want it to be. Maybe somebody said, if we mention Buddhism, this will turn off Christians, or it'll become sectarian, or I don't know. But all the speakers are Buddhist. All the books they reference are Buddhist. Sam Harris is a practicing Buddhist. Dan Harris is a practicing Buddhist. So they talk about meditation, awareness. They talk about meditation practice, but they never mention Buddhism, which that is kind of a thing we see. I mean, I see that happen a lot. So I wish they would. But I think it's kind of obvious that it's so obvious that it seems really obvious that it's not being mentioned. It's like that, it's like the elephant in the room. Like everybody knows that's what they're talking about, but they don't say it.
But it seems like the quality of life is probably better than without starting on this path, minimalism. And it maybe eventually you would hope it would lead them ultimately they might be in a closer place to
Right.
be open to Buddhism, because they're kind of introduced to it already.
Yeah, another idea is that if somebody's doing all the things that runners do, like they're runners, like they may not call themselves runners, but if they're getting up every morning and running a mile and they do a 10K and they go to snail's pace and they wear Asics trainers, you're a runner. They may say, oh, I'm not a runner, I only run a 9-minute mile, but you are a runner. So, I would argue that if you do all these things, you are Buddhist, because it's an activity, it's a practice. So, you can call it whatever you want, but my dad used to say, if you look like a duck and walk like a duck and sound like a duck, you're a duck. So, if you do all these things, you are being mindful and practicing the Buddhist way. And there's a lot of self-reflection in this too, to figure out, what kind of a person am I? Like one person might find deep meaning in becoming a Jodo Shinshu minister, but for somebody else, that may not be at all what you want to do. So everybody has to kind of figure out, what is their authentic purpose and what brings them true happiness in life. So that's you really have to think about that. And in Buddhism, in the East, authenticity is kind of the ultimate virtue, is living a life that really is meaningful for you, is kind of the ultimate goal in life. So, Emily's a teacher. She makes less money than Teague makes as a PA, but I think a teacher teachers work incredibly hard. They're way undervalued. And so I don't know why our economy, it's kind of an editorial on our economy. I kind of saw it as why do we choose some trades or jobs are rewarded more than others? And I think teachers, counselors, nurses are, really provide great value to our society, and I don't understand why. So, the people that made the most money was marketing, lawyers, or the health industry were the people, and entertainment. So it's skewed for some reason. Okay, do you want to flip the page? So, goodbye to things, hello to minimalism. Can living with less make you happier? Fumio Sasaki owns a roll-up mattress, 3 shirts, and 4 pairs of socks. After deciding to scorn possessions, he began feeling happier. He explains why. Let me tell you a bit about myself. I'm 35 years old, male, single, never married. I work as an editor at a publishing company. I recently moved from the Nakameguro neighborhood in Tokyo, where I lived for a decade, to a neighborhood called Fudomae, in a different part of town. The rent is cheaper, but the move pretty much wiped out my savings. Some of you may think that I'm a loser, an unmarried adult with not much money. The old me would have been way too embarrassed to admit all this. I was filled with useless pride, but I honestly don't care about things like that anymore. The reason is very simple. I'm perfectly happy just as I am. The reason, I got rid of most of my material possessions. Minimalism is a lifestyle in which you reduce your possessions to the least possible. Living with only the bare essentials has not only provided superficial benefits, such as the pleasure of a tidy room or the simple ease of cleaning, it has also led to a more fundamental shift. It gave me a chance to think about what it really means to be happy. We think that the more we have, the happier we'll be. We never know what tomorrow might bring, so we collect and save as much as we can. This means we need a lot of money. So we gradually start judging people by how much money they have. You convince yourself that you need to make a lot of money so you don't miss out on success. And for you to make money, you need everyone else to spend their money, and so it goes. So I said goodbye to a lot of things, many of which I had for years, and yet now I live each day with a happier spirit. I feel more content now than I ever did in the past. It may sound as if I'm exaggerating when I say I started to become a new person. Someone said to me, "All you did is throw things away," which is true. But by having fewer things around me, I started feeling happier each day. I'm slowly beginning to understand what happiness is. If you are anything like I used to be, miserable, constantly comparing yourself with others, or just believing your life sucks, I think you should try saying goodbye to some of your things. Yes, there are certainly people who haven't ever been attached to material objects, or those rare geniuses who can thrive amid the chaos of their possessions. But I want to think about the ways that ordinary people like you and me can find the real happiness in life. Everyone wants to be happy, but trying to buy happiness only makes us happy for a little while. We are lost when it comes to true happiness. After what I've been through, I think saying goodbye to your things is more than an exercise in tidying up. I think it's an exercise in learning about true happiness. Maybe this sounds grandiose, but I seriously think it's true. So this is kind of interesting. I didn't know this when I found these articles, but they're both emphasizing the fact that Marie Kondo's approach is way beyond just decluttering your house, right? That's just the beginning of the process. So any thoughts or comments?
Reverend John? I'm sorry.
Oh.
Here's Stacy.
It's harder to declutter than you think. Eugene and I went through this. I read the Marie Kondo book several years ago, and what we succeeded in doing is moving the stuff that we wanted to move out into just another part of our house. And it's become this albatross, this thing that's hanging around our necks, because we're trying to figure out the best place for all of these things to go.
Right.
And because we don't want them to just end up in a landfill.
Right.
And they are no longer sparking joy. But we're on the path to get this done. And we do really like the process. And so if, for those of you who may or may not know what this Marie Kondo thing is about, you may only have heard some of the backlash against it, but I think the backlash is just a bunch of poo-poo. I think it has a really good message and point to it. And I like to say, instead of minimalism, I call it essentializing.
Right. I think that's a better term.
And actually, I applied it to a lot more things than just stuff.
Right.
In some cases, you have to almost apply it to people. And I know that sounds awkward, but not everybody helps you on this path.
Right.
And so I'm essentializing to try and keep people around me who are essential to me.
So I think that's a really good term. You want what is essential to your happiness. The other thing they said in the documentary, and I don't remember the numbers, but they said something like there's a $2 billion public storage industry in our country. You know those orange garages that are everywhere? That's where everybody's putting their stuff, because it just keeps piling up, and everybody has 3-car garages, but most of my neighbors, nobody parks in their garage now. So, but you do have to be, I'm kind of an extremist. So like I was sitting on the Nigene today thinking about it. I threw away my notes from my modern algebra class at UCLA. And Emily's a math teacher. And I had one shining moment. Well, I did good at UCLA, but I got 100% on my modern algebra final. And there was a guy in the class that was kind of a genius. And he actually wrote on my paper, "You did better than Victor." So, like I was sitting on the Nigene today thinking, I decluttered the attic and I threw away all my notes and all my books from UCLA, and I wished I would have kept. So you have to do it very deliberately. You don't, I don't do decluttering very well. I just throw everything away, and then a year later I freak out because there was something really important that I should have kept. So you have to be very deliberate and you have to be very thoughtful about it. You can't just say everything in the attic's got to go. Question?
It's not a question, it's more of something that I do. In those kind of occasions, I tend to keep a bunch of papers from school, because I know I'm going to need them in the field that I'm going to need in the future at some point. Also, cards, whenever people sends me, "Hey, happy birthday," I like to keep those things. I like to go back and look at them, and they bring me joy. So what I do is I scan them, and I put them on the cloud, so that way you can throw away the pictures, the old drawings from your kids when they were 5, and you can always have them available.
Yeah, that's nice.
Yeah. Another thing that one of my friends does is that when his kid was born, he opened an email account for his children, and all the photos, he just emails them to that account. And the plan is that at the 18th birthday, he's going to give them the password for that account so they can go and look at all the things.
That's great. That's great.
When my mom passed away, I think she's a generation some people might call pat rack. But when we were going through her items and cleaning her room, I found my 5-year-old handprint. I found the recipe card I made her for Mother's Day. Every little picture my children drew her. So I think it's okay to keep the things that have meaning to you.
Yes.
And that was what was important to her.
Right.
And it gave me such joy, later in life to find those things. So some of this minimalism, I think, as long as you keep what is important to you, that's okay.
Yeah. I think I agree with you totally, and that's why I think that essentialism comment was so good. But in the documentary, there's people with like 40 sweaters, it's kind of an extreme example. They've got, like every color. I had a friend of mine once who hated shopping, and he would just buy like every color of a shirt that fit, So, some people do that. They have like nobody needs 60 pairs of socks, things like that. It just keeps piling up. So.
I think I've always had a little bit of a handle on this kind of thing. I've always been that way about like, I don't need this, I don't need that, I don't need that. I only have one pair of shoes, I only have 2 pairs of pants, I only have a nice shirt, a medium shirt, and a house shirt. Like for instance, when my wife met me, she was like, you should get a dining room table. And I was like, why? So maybe I'm a little bit extreme, but I also think that the whole point of all of this is to, like, it leads you to happiness. Whatever that is that makes you happy. If saving a little box of photos and cards and all that stuff makes you happy, then keep it.
Yes.
If getting rid and looking at your nice clean garage makes you happy, then do that.
Right.
Because happiness, I think, is something that doesn't just, like, people think like, well, just tomorrow I'll be happy, it'll be better. But I think happiness is something you really have to, you kind of have to like find it. You have to search for it. You know what? I'm not happy doing this. What would make me happy?
Right.
I think I'd like a clean room or a clean
Right.
garage, or
Right.
I should get rid of these things that don't make me happy.
Right.
I'm good at those things like that, but then I also, like, I like Star Wars and I like to read books, so I have a whole shelf of books, and she's like, get them on the ebook. And I'm like, but I like to hold books, and I like to smell them, and I like to have a bookmark in them. So, like, everybody has their thing, and that's what makes you happy. So find that, because that's what is going to matter in the end, you know?
Right. They also did a thing on the documentary where, these McMansions, like really large houses with like 4,000 square feet. More? Oh, 10,000? I thought this was interesting, but maybe overkill, but they did research with heat monitors, heat sensors. And I'm sure they told the family they were going to do this, but they would monitor the home with heat sensors, and they found that most people only use about 40% of their square footage, and like nobody uses the dining room. Like when Linda and I first moved into our house, we used the kitchen and the family room, and we never would go in the living room or the dining room. And so they were saying that we're buying houses much larger than we really need, because we just get caught kind of in this. It's just the next logical step to get more. We kind of do it on autopilot. So. Oh. Christine.
I love where some of you have gone with this whole happiness, emphasis, and I love that you coined the term essentialism, because if you're a chef, part of your joy, for instance, would be like, ooh, all the different colors of produce, of carrots or watermelon or things that you could get, and part of your joy is your creativity. Mm-hmm. But obviously, if you don't have enough room, or if it's gonna all go bad by the time you've bought all the vegetables, that could be an issue, but if that's their joy, I'm not gonna judge somebody for that, because that's what they love. But on the big house thing, I see how somebody could make good use of it if they're using it for parties, if they're renting it out for weddings or whatever. If they're making good use of it and that's bringing people joy, I think that somebody with a big house could, really make a lot of people happy if they can put it to good use. Just saying.
Where I live, the big houses are becoming Airbnbs. That's what's happening. And there are parties. Anyone else? Okay, thank you very much for coming. We'll close with Gasho. Namo Amida Butsu. Naman Dabuts. Naman Dabuts. Naman Dabuts. All right, thank you very much.